Is it time? Fuck it. We'll do it live. Oh, wrong button. There we are. Hi, nerds. Happy Sunday. Sorry I'm here on a weird day. Things have been chaotic. Let me make sure I have all this pulled up. Actually, I don't need to hide what I'm doing here. Pop out. Copy. Paste. Pause there to use less bandwidth. Oh, for those who understand the hell that is Windows, I've been fucking going through it. So I have a desktop that's connected to my TV downstairs. It's how I like play music, watch things, and play games on my TV. I put an extra SSD in because I filled the built-in one. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with Windows. Every time the computer sleeps or is left on for long enough, my new NVMe SSD just disconnects. Then I have to reboot for it to come back. Apparently, this is the known thing with the most recent Windows update. The new Windows update's known for torching SSDs and causing a ton of problems. I've seen a ton of people talking about this in particular recently. So yeah, fuck Windows. Boy, what's this? Ooh. Did it happen? I did have this saved. Yeah, I will not do that today, but I will definitely do that once I finish up my like overhaul of Snitchbench. I was hoping to do it on the plane, but got really distracted. I've been way too busy. Yeah, good luck using Linux on a 4K 120 hertz TV with upscaling working in a way that is functional across the apps you want to use, especially if you're using like audio stuff, like high fidelity audio software that needs direct driver access, like Tidal or Quobuz. No. If I was to move to Windows, I'd be writing or if I was to move to Linux, I'd be writing my own audio driver, and I'm not doing that. Channel's a bit of a spectacle. That's expected, but if the thing that they covered is of value, I can start from there. Yeah. On top of that, half the games I want to play will not play on Linux. Like Skate does not work properly on Linux right now because of the kernel level anti-cheat stuff. Fall Guys doesn't. Fortnite doesn't. A bunch of things I play on the TV will not work on Linux. I'd be giving up half of what does work to maybe fix one of the things that doesn't. Doesn't make any sense. I'm waiting for a new I guess Fall Guys is kind of dead, but like that was one of the games I played the most on my TV. I really miss OG Fall Guys era. It was so good. Let me thank all the subs that I missed. Shamu starting us strong with the 10 bomb. Appreciate that a ton. Itse with the 4 months of support. Appreciate that. Chesk here with the 5 bomb. Thank you so much. Shamu here with the tier 1. Gift to Garrett, actually. Appreciate the gifting today. And then Grim here with the 4 months. Yeah, Linux does indeed exist. They were correct. Oh, Power World. I miss Power World. I did actually try playing it again recently. I think my cat's already knocked down the anti-cat barrier. That did not take long. Windboat, what the fuck is this? No. This will not solve any of my problems. No. Absolutely not. Give me 1 sec. Like Wine doesn't make kernel level anti-cheat work. I did my offset while I did that. Marker offset 001820. Grim with the 5 bomb. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Maple throwing their sub in. Linux is a conspiracy made up by Big Server. Lol. Paying me back for the cookies at React Conf. Appreciate that, Corbin. Hope you're doing well. Great seeing you as well. QEMU? Lol. Like that will help with any of the things I'm doing. Laptops for gaming are not really good. As someone who owns multiple gaming laptops, cheap out and get an older Mac, plug in an SSD when you need more storage, and buy a used gaming PC from somebody who's going to college. And you can get like a good gaming desktop and a good enough MacBook together for like under $2,000. That's definitely the path I would take. Meta superintelligence paper. Okay. Refrag. Interesting. I will read that later. I have seen AI Fiesta. I'm not going to use AI Fiesta. I accept all cookies at React Conf. Well, good joke. So I'm not using ASRock Mobos or cheap SSDs. I'm using a Dell XPS, which is one of the most reliable desktops you can buy, because I bought it for a crazy set of discounts because Black Friday, plus I had Dell credit, plus like a liquidation. I was able to get a desktop with a 4090 in it for $1,900 or so. I think I actually paid like $1,500 after all my credit, which is cheaper than just the GPU would have been. So I put the GPU in my main rig, hadn't had that as my TV rig, eventually moved the 4090 back to it because I could. And I also bought a really nice Western Digital 4 terabyte SSD because it was on sale, like fucking $600 drive. So I did not cheap out on any components. And the SSD is fine. It is a Windows bug that is a known Windows bug. Like, I know I'm not known as like the hardware guy who does a lot of like building and whatnot, because you guys think of me as the soy boy Mac dev doing web stuff. But I guarantee you, I know more about system building than the vast majority of y'all do, if not, at least the vast majority of people who spoke up. Like, I've built so many systems. I used to make systems for a living when I was in high school. I also built a bunch and repaired a bunch with my Easy Tech job at Staples. I've been inside of far too many computers. There's a reason I buy the MacBook, because I want my work machine to not be a problem. And going forward, I'll almost certainly be building, or no, I most certainly won't be building PCs. I'll just buy pre-built, so I have somebody else to deal with it. I want to wait a little more before doing the Remix 3 video. I just want more coverage of it. And like maybe some documentation. What is this? I saw a lot of people talking about the Reddit mod getting some company to shut down. I've seen a little bit on the Discord hack, but not really a thing I have anything to add to. I've covered this a little bit. I think that there's more demand to fill jobs, which makes it more, how do I put it? Like, roles get filled faster. So you got to be on top of it. It's not impossible to get a job right now. It's just not as viable to do it the old school, boring way of just throwing applications at companies. Like, cold app to hire pipeline is fucked right now. Everything else is fine. Yeah, you definitely need an upgraded rig if you're running a 1660 Ti laptop for games. Only in it for the money. Ugh, gross. I was literally talking with the team yesterday, and they said that they weren't going to do this. They said a lot of people wanted it, but they weren't going. What the fuck did they do that? Is it the actual thing, or is it just plugins? I think this is just the plugins. Yeah, this is just plugins. You baited me. Yeah, I know. This is like where they track issues for Claude Code, but it's not the package. The Claude Code package is not in here. I forgot about this repo because it's so useless because it doesn't have the package for Claude Code itself in it. So you baited me. I had entirely forgotten about that. Also, Jiraj with the tier 3 for 38 months. Fucking legend out here. Appreciate that a ton. I love that I have Jira as a banned word. They moved the status label. It created a user revolt. What did Bun tweet? Oh, yeah, I saw this. Good post. Also, hi, YouTube chat. Sorry I've not been as active here. Cold applying is not going to get you a job. Watch my other videos about the state of the market if you want to figure out how to actually get a job. You don't have friends, you're probably not going to get a job. Yeah, you're not wrong, S. John. Skate does have a lot of problems with Windows. It crashes my rig a little bit more than it probably should. Locked and Coded also at 38 months of tier 3. Fucking legend. Appreciate y'all a bunch. You can absolutely show YouTube chat on Twitch. You can't merge the chats. You can't have them in one view. So I can't have a website that combines Twitch chat and YouTube chat. Let's figure out what we're doing today. If there are docs for Remix v3, I'll give it a chance. But I'm assuming there's nothing yet. I also don't like the idea of calling it v3 when it's not like back compat at all. Like there's no path for Remix v2 users to move to v3. Should be called something else. Your chats. Oh, you're on VPN. Almost certainly. VPNs will eat your messages quietly because Twitch is yeah. Getting sources. Yeah, I think this is worth waiting for a bit more. Yeah, I've seen there's drama. Yeah. Did Convex do an agents thing? Nah, it's old. Helium vertical tabs? What? What? They did it? I didn't think they would actually do it. Oh. Wait, I want the URL bar. Oh, yep. There we go. But maybe you need to actually modify source then instead of just using patch files. What do you think patch files are? Oh, man. Yeah, it's going to need some work for sure. But, man, if they actually pull this off. I'll keep an eye on that. Yeah, we definitely do not deserve Wacko. Why I threw so much money over in that direction. It's important to support developers like them. We definitely need to get Wacko out of where they currently are located. I don't know if that's public information or not, but yes. Wacko in EU or US would be a huge win for the entire ecosystem. The bridge is long since burned. I'm not interested in Dia. I'm not betting on the browser company ever, especially now that they're part of fucking Atlassian. No, it's not for me anymore at all. Cold applying take? Well, sorry, missed that. Concert the other day, some dude spent the concert holding up and pointing to a note on his phone. Yeah. Oh, God. That is super cringe. Oh. Thank you for the money in here. Oh, shit. I left and came back, and Rick donated. Good to see you, Rick. Did you see me like your post and then show up? Lol. I do read YouTube chat, just not very often. Oh shit, Grim with a 5 bomb as well. Thank you guys all for the support. Appreciate y'all a ton. I just realized I forgot to hit the Twitter button because I have to do that custom. Producer. Twitter Live is so annoying. Advanced content restrictions unavailable. Select Source Studio. The fact that you have to do this for every fucking stream on Twitter, it's so dumb. Cool. Now I'm live on Twitter as well. Twitter Live is worth it just so that I have the red barrier around my profile picture so people know that just from the border that I'm live. View count decrease. Is this the... Oh, I was paying close attention to all this when it happened. It absolutely was a hit for us. And it's bounced back almost entirely since. Twitch live viewership counting is super broken. Oh no, is Ryan bitching more? Yep. Rip. Your options for your GitHub getting nuked incorrectly is to bitch on Twitter. And it also sounds like your VPN is shit and you need to stop using it. If you couldn't get messages through on Twitch and your GitHub got banned, you're on some shit sketchy VPN you need to get off of. My cat just broke down the barrier again. Sorry, I can't show the cat because I take off his collar because his collar has just my phone number on it. Not dealing with that. We're already behind. We need to start filming. Let's get my list of things I want to talk about with React. Okay, I think this is all the main things I want to talk about. I just had a request. I'm also doing a bunch of benching on like the Cloudflare stuff still. And I was just requested to rerun it, so I'm going to do that quick. Cool. I'll let that run in the background. Sorry about that. I'm doing like so much random shit at the same time. I don't use it. The reason why I'm not doing this on Instagram as well. Once it loads. I have like 4,500 followers on Instagram and I exclusively use it for skateboarding. No. Insta's for skating. Everything else is for tech shit. Yeah, I've learned this, Ryan. For what it's worth, Cloudflare's been awesome about it. Like, they're doing some really cool stuff because of my benchmark. They've confirmed that they'll be running it indefinitely internally, which is really cool. Because they want to make sure they don't have more regressions. A lot of the problems I ran into were regressions that they just hadn't detected for like months, if not years. Let me send this quick to Dane. Okay, confirmed that my performance on Vercel is still slightly better than Cloudflare, but continuing to get closer. Here, I'll let you guys see the final output here. 1.21x faster and 1.22x faster. Sorry, I was doing some work. I did see the new CF Workers page. It looks great. Oh, yeah, Jay, thanks for joining the T3 Club on YouTube. Yeah, thank you for watching that. I was really proud of that interview. I feel like there's a lot of good content in there that you're not going to get otherwise. Let's get started. I feel like I have everything I need to here. D&D my phone. Don't get distracted. Cool. Yeah, it mentions me if you type the name. It's the problem of having my name as the handle on Twitch. Don't worry, though. I don't care. I expect to be mentioned a bunch on my chat. Yeah, that was filmed forever ago. Let's get started with this. Which of these is the one by... oh, yeah, Wag. He confirmed I can make content out of that, which is great. Definitely will be doing that later. This is done. I'm just going to mark it as dead because we published it separately. I think I accidentally doubled it up. What's this one? Okay, cool. Yeah, Future of React, Remix v3, I'm going to hold until we have actual info for it. Performance of Vercel and Cloudflare for cost? Fuck no. Why would I do that? That's not the point. Like, there's like 500 variables you have to factor in order to do that. And on top of that, you don't get to improve performance on Cloudflare. You have a hard ceiling. There is no button you can press in Cloudflare to make it perform better. There's a lot of buttons you can press on other platforms because you have actual control over the instance. It's just, if we're going to talk about cost to perf, the platforms all need options for cost and perf. Let's get started with Future React. This is the important one. And I'm sure that if Ricky is still here, he is patiently waiting for this. Probably should have started this marker later, but whatever. Sorry, face. I hate that button. Future of React. Let me get all the key things in here. Cool. Let's get started. Yeah. Anyways. I have everything I need. Sorry, I'm just distracted a bit. Give me one sec. I think we're good. Yeah, I think we're good. Let's do it. Cool. My voice. Ugh, you know, my fucking voice has been bothering me all day. Give me a sec. I'm gonna go blow my nose and chug some water. Okay, yeah. I feel significantly better already. That was easy. Cool. let's do it. So I just got back from React Conf, and if I'm being honest with you guys, I wasn't expecting a whole lot in terms of announcements. And on one hand, there really wasn't too much. But on the other, a lot of things are starting to change, and I feel like I'm getting a clearer picture of what the future of React looks like. And it's quite a bit different from what I had expected in the past, so I want to take some time to talk about it. There was a lot of little things that have come up over the last few weeks, and any one of them isn't really worth a whole dedicated video, but the combination of all of them almost certainly is. So it's going to be a bit different from usual. Usually my videos go all in on one thing, like one blog post, one topic, one idea, but this is more about the things happening in React and around React, and most importantly, where I suspect we are going with the entire ecosystem. From the React Foundation, which is the new management, from the React Foundation, which is the higher, from the change in leadership for React, where there's now a fundamental, I kind of want to put this point. From the change in leadership for React, where it's now led by a foundation instead of just Meta, to all the fun Vue transitions and what this means for how we write React and use React going forward, to React Fur, which is the all-new rendering engine that may or may not ever ship. It was more a deep dive experimental attempt to make React even faster. React Router with server components, which, don't sleep on this, server components in React Router is possibly the path for server components for the majority of apps. As cool as Next.js is, a lot of projects aren't and will never be on server components. Retake on that last bit. As cool as Next.js is, there are a ton of projects that will never reasonably move off of React Router and like the old school Webpack config that they got from Create React App. And this is a path for them to modernize without having to move away from the tools they're already using and towards something like Next.js. React Native had a ton of cool things, in particular static Hermes, which is going to be really cool for a lot of things, especially potentially compiler. And of course, Remix v3, which is its own crazy rabbit hole that I'll do my best to not go down too far, but there is some stuff to cover. Also, FaZe, when I mentioned React Fur, if you could sneak one of the screenshots of the benchmark that I posted tweets of, if you could sneak that in there, I think that would be useful. Cool. We have a lot of things to talk about, but only one sponsor. Let's hear. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today, but only one sponsor. So let's hear from them really quick. Please don't ask about other things while I'm filming. It distracts me a ton. FaZe. Yes, perfect. I will drop that in the notes for FaZe. Cool. Perfect. Cool. Let's start blasting through these topics. First, we have the React Foundation. This is a huge change for how React is being run, and I think it signifies some other potential changes long-term as well. The React Foundation is a group of companies, including Amazon, CallStack, Expo, Meta, Microsoft, Software Mansion, and Vercel, that are now going to run React together. If you don't know what these companies are, maybe you've heard of Amazon. They're a kind of small e-store. If you're not familiar with these companies, I'll go through them quick. You might have heard of Amazon. I know they're kind of new. They're a shop for buying books and things online. Not really sure what Meta is, but okay. The ones you probably don't know about, if there's anything on here, are CallStack, Expo, and Software Mansion. CallStack and Software Mansion are two ecosystem maintainers and consultancy groups that do a lot of consulting for big React projects, in particular React Native. They work on everything from they help a lot with crazy projects like React Native for Mac and Windows, whatever the hell's going on PlayStation, just a lot of different deeper dive stuff. Software Mansion's done a lot of the work for the crazy animation libraries within the React Native ecosystem. Two great companies. And then Expo, the people making all the React Native tooling we use to spin up and distribute our React Native applications. All really good companies. I've had nothing but incredible interactions with all three of them. It makes a ton of sense to see them here alongside Microsoft, who's betting hard on React for Windows and Mac, Amazon, who's betting hard on React Native for everything, and Vercel, who I guess has used React before. In their words, we open sourced React over a decade ago to help devs build great user experiences. From its earliest days, React has received substantial contributions from contributors outside of Meta. Over time, the number of contributors and the scope of their contributions has grown significantly. What started out as a tool developed for Meta has expanded into a project that spans multiple companies with regular contributions from across the ecosystem. React has outgrown the confines of any one company. To better serve the React community, we're announcing our plans to move React and React Native from Meta to a new React Foundation. As part of this change, we will also be implementing a new independent technical governance structure. We believe these changes will enable us to give React ecosystem projects more resources. I have thoughts here as well. How do I put this? In a world where company priorities change on like the flip of a coin, having one company owning something this big is a bit scary. Like, Meta's changed priorities internally so many different times that React isn't necessarily safe within those Meta's changed their focus so many times recently that React isn't necessarily safe amongst the chaos. If your framework or tool is owned by one team at a company that is a very small team relative to the size of the company, the React team is very small relative to Meta. If that's the case, you're one reorg away from dying. And it's no secret that Meta's been going through a lot of reorgs recently. As a hedge to make sure that React will survive any chaos internally, any shakeup, any changes, any leadership moves, I like this a lot. Because a lot of us are betting on React, but Meta could change where their bets are going at any given time. This is all just incentive, or this is all incentives and structures, but this is all understanding incentives on a business level. But the harsh reality is that if any one of these companies now decided, oh, maybe React's the wrong thing. Like, let's say Vercel moves to Svelte or Vue because they now have the SvelteKit team and the Nux team at Vercel. If they go away and stop focusing on React, we still have 6 other companies that are down. Same with Meta, Amazon, CallStack, Expo, Software Mansion, Microsoft. All of these companies are now going to help prevent any potential damage to React, as well as having more incentive to contribute to it. There's also a future where additional companies could come in. I also think it's worth talking about the fact that people have never understood how React was run. There's this weird perception that the React team is majority at Vercel and just a few people are left at Meta, when the truth is kind of the opposite. The majority of the contributions to React were still from Meta, but we've seen as much from Vercel as we have from Microsoft recently, especially if you count React Native stuff as well. There's been a lot of effort from other places, and this helps distribute the ownership across a larger group that are all going to be voting and making sure that React is going in the right direction for all of our needs. This also means things are going to move slower because there's now a much longer process to make things happen that involves way more people making decisions. But this should hopefully, fingers crossed, make the future of React a little bit more stable and brighter. I would also go as far as to say that if this was the structure before, something like server components might not have happened, because the only companies here that are really interested in and really investing in server components are Vercel and very slightly Meta, because Meta kind of solved the same problem with the chaos of Relay before. Cool. So that's the React Foundation. Next, we have Vue transitions along with async React. We've touched on this stuff a little bit before, but Ricky's talks really emphasized how far it's gone. And when I say talks, it really was just one talk, but it was a talk with some weird splits. Let's see if I can find them quick. Assuming they haven't uploaded the individual talks yet. Why would they? Yeah, not yet. As expected. That's fine. I can work with the streams.
Trusted by world's leaders.
Let's find Rick's first half. Also, hi, Rick.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. How we doing? So, while preparing for this talk, I dug deep into some of the history of React and found some old meeting notes from 2015 and 2016. Ten years ago, we started an ambitious project to rewrite the entire architecture of React to support incremental rendering. The team knew it was important and had conviction that it was the right direction, but there were a lot of ideas and opinions about what it would look like, and we had to understand it for ourselves.
I know way too much history here with Sebastian and Jordan's battle for how to make the new render model work. Wild, chaotic wars have happened in order to make all of this occur. And if you guys remember, what was it? 2018 was the React Conf talk where this all got announced because it was the React hooks, but also concurrent React was in here too. Or was concurrent mode the year before? Tomo. Oh no, it was Andrew, Clark, and Brian did that 2018.
The last example.
Yeah, it was 2018. I remembered right. Yeah. Concurrent React was originally brought up in 2018. As crazy as that seems now, this was our first demo of it and showcasing of how the new rendering could hypothetically work. It was a big part of why hooks were introduced, as they would be theoretically easier to slice and run concurrently with the new model. And then concurrent React kind of went a lot of different paths. There's a great video by UI.dev about the history of concurrent React, but the story's changed a little bit now because we now have what is effectively incremental React, or as they refer to it here, async React. It's not just concurrency. There's a lot of other layers to it, and the result is a pretty different mental model. I'm going to skip in a bit.
Intermediate loading states. We think we had a solution that we've been building for a while. We call it async React. Async React is async by default. So one of the key insights is that by structuring your app so that everything is async, then you're able to handle fast network and slow network. So when the network is slow, you have the nice loading states, but if it's fast, you shouldn't have any loading states. That's an entirely new way to structure your app that is asynchronous by default. Okay, but how do we do it? You want to see a demo?
I don't remember how much of the demo was in the first part because you got cut off.
Okay, so here we have our login page. And we're doing what we were doing in the last example of setting pending true, and then we log in, we set it to false, and then we navigate to the page. And that gives us this experience. Do you see the flash of content there? That's not great. So let's fix it using React features.
I don't know how much of this I want to put. I'll just tell people to go see the actual thing. I really want to just dive straight into the new patterns. Is this right where you get cut off?
My data was still cached. There you go. So now you get a suspense boundary. And let's say we want to add some animations. Come in. That didn't work.
Okay, this is just view transition. I want the async React stuff, which I don't think makes it in for this part.
Okay, and then in handle complete.
Yeah, let me hop over here.
Oh. Kind of has the same experience. So as I
Oh, you guys are getting the gray flicker. I know why that happens. I had to write custom firmware to fix that. Relevant Ryan tweet. I'll pull that up in the background.
I mentioned earlier in my talk, these are not one-off features where you can just drop them in somewhere and they just work for that one specific use case. This is an entire re-architecture of how you think about building your apps.
Cut most of the dilly-dallying I've been doing here phase. Ideally, we'll go straight to that quote from Rick of like, this is a complete re-architecture.
These are not one-off features where you can just drop them in somewhere and they just work for that one specific use case. This is an entire re-architecture of how you think about building your apps by building them async first. So the problem here is we added start transition, but it still performs the same as before, because fundamentally the issue is here in our use effect. We're not fetching the data until after we've already committed the results to the screen. Once we've committed the results of the completed state to the screen, then we fetch to get the new data. And you can solve this with a lot of different techniques, when like doing a client-side cache and using a store, and when it updates, you update your client cache. But that has problems in terms of maybe you have different tabs open, or there's different users changing the data. And that's why you'll end up hitting a lot of cases where you have conflicts with the server and the data that's actually in the database. So it's actually best to refetch everything from the server, but if you're going to refetch everything from the server, you need something to coordinate it for you. So let's replace this effect. And let's do that with suspense. So I'm going to do a little caching for promises. If anybody's familiar with use, you got to cache your promises. And that means we can delete some of this code. Let's delete this effect. Don't need that anymore. Let's update our revalidate function to clear the cache whenever we revalidate, and then when we update, we'll need to do that in a transition, just so that it's combined with any other transitions that we have. And our app's going to be broken for a minute. And then we can go to our lesson list. And now we don't have our lessons, because we deleted it from above, but we can just use those. And now we don't need this fallback here. We can delete this. We can use suspense for our fallback.
If I recall, this all
If I
breaks
missed
because
anything,
of stupid small things.
I did miss this.
Yeah, there was a couple things. I think you just copy pasted the code in the end to make it work.
I heard this view transition API is pretty dope, and I can just do one line, right? Oh, that's really nice. It's pretty sick.
View transitions are so cool and they solve so many problems. Instead of managing like 15 states in the component doesn't exist until the data it needs is there. That's the key thing to think about differently with view transitions in suspense. The goal here is to take away a lot of the mental burden and like the component architectural burden that exists in so many applications today. Let me see if I can find a good example in a real code base of mine. Cool. Already found an example. Did not take long. We have 33 instances of is loading. In its current implementation, the status banner has a data state and it is loading state. And we have this check to return null if is loading. This one also has another case where we return null. But this is control flow that only has to exist because this component exists whether or not the data is there, and we have to handle the case in the component of when the data isn't there. The shift here is that the component itself can be treated asynchronously, so to speak, where the component doesn't exist until the data exists. And when you put a use call in, you're effectively saying, don't go any further until we have this. Previously with React, you would just render through every layer in the component. If something took too long, you'd let it go happen in the background and have a loading state in the component. And that control flow just kind of sucked because if you do an early return, but you want to access another hook later, you're screwed. You can't assume the data exists because the data just might not exist yet. So ideally, I wouldn't have to handle this here. I could handle it higher up. If I had just is loading as the condition, I'll just delete this so you can understand what I'm trying to point out. Like if I have this here to get us out when in loading state, instead that can happen higher up. And it keeps us from having these pending states in here. So if instead I had like a loading spinner here or something, that's control flow that shouldn't belong to the component. The component should just not exist until all of the things it needs exist. And that's what view transitions plus suspense give you, is the suspense gives you the ability to treat the component like the data is already there when it does render, combined with view transitions, which gives you the ability to animate the different states. Because previously, if you wanted this to fade in or out or handle those cases, you'd have to do all of that in this component. So even if suspense let you pull the loading state out, you'd end up wanting it still to make a good fallback and animated experience between them. The combination of those two pieces gives you way fewer reasons to handle all this stuff in the component, which should hopefully make our components way simpler and as a result make our apps faster because we don't have this hierarchy of loading like blockers preventing the entire tree from rendering.
All right, so now how is our transition working for the checking done? Let's try it. Nice. Mark these 3 done. It waits.
I want to see the code for that part. I know it's in here somewhere.
The data until after we've already committed the React. Let's see how it performs. So now let's click one of these. Oh. Kind of has the same experience. So, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, these are not one-off.
I thought the loading buttons changes.
Completed state to the screen, then we fetch to get the new data. And you can solve this with doing replace this effect, suspense. Don't need that anymore. Revalidate. Because we deleted it. I did miss this. Got to delete that. All right. While we're one line, right? Oh, it's pretty dope. Now,
I
controversy.
can't find where that was added, but you get the general idea here. Is there more code in here worth showing?
But it still will wait and suspend when we change to the tab.
Yeah. Actually, I'll touch on one other little thing here. There's one other really cool thing they did with all the suspense and view transition stuff. It'd be very easy to get yourself into a bad state where you're constantly having things pop in. If you click 3 buttons to do 3 things, and they all take, if you click 3 buttons that do 3 things, and they all take some amount of time to resolve, and they end up resolving and completing their work within like 200 milliseconds of each other. If you don't do anything custom, that's going to have if you don't do anything special, it's going to have a lot of pop in. You're going to have different UI changing in different places, and the experience sucks. It's really, really bad for users to have a lot of change happening close to each other. So what React does is auto debounces. When you have lots of these transitions and fallbacks and suspense things going on, it'll wait for just a little bit to see if any more happen, and then everything will come in together at once, which is really, really nice. And these are the little things that they figure. These are the little things that would have required a bunch of code and are kind of magic, so to speak. And I try to avoid magic and things as important as these tools and these frameworks, but the combination of view transitions and the behavior that the combination of view transitions and the behaviors Ricky is sharing in chat here, the transition waits for suspense to finish. So good. It lets you do all of these things that would otherwise pop in and be really tough to get good for the user, and makes it way simpler. There is some magic where some things will take longer than you might expect to resolve in the UI by like 1 to 200 milliseconds, but it's so much simpler. I wish there was more good code examples. I'm sure there will be plenty in the near future. I might even whip some up myself, but this is all part of the stuff that's in React Canary right now. React 19.2 does not have view transitions yet, but it's happening. There's also a lot of work going on with the Chrome team to make sure that this all can be a really good experience, and hopefully Safari and Firefox will have it ready to go by the time this is officially launched. But man, this is a really weird, I'm trying to remember how to put this, like, this is the closest React has gone to like doing things for you on like the implementation details level in a lot of ways, where it's like much more opinionated than most React primitives are. But when you take some opinions, you end up simplifying a lot of things. When you build a framework with no opinions, the result is that everything is going to require a ton of boilerplate to do anything reasonable. But with opinions, like instead of having a loading state, you should have the data there and hoist the loading state up. Opinions like if you have a lot of things loading at once, you should debounce the render so that they can all pop in together if it's within a reasonable amount of time. Instead of animating by doing different states inside of the components, you should animate by wrapping it with a view transition. These opinions lead us to a place where things can be much simpler these opinions lead us to a place where you can make something way simpler if your goals are aligned with the tooling and the way that it works. This should make a lot of stuff way easier to build and write and maintain. But the future is very exciting with this stuff. And I am so hyped to have view transitions, and I'm so hyped for view transitions, even if the browser I'm using right now is Firefox based, so they'll be iffy. Fingers crossed that will change in the near future. I think I've covered enough about async React and view transitions that deserves its own video in the near future. We got to talk about fur. Oh, React fur. This is right after my panel, funny enough. I actually haven't watched this since. I don't even know how I looked on the couch. There are very few cuts to me, at least in the highlight. Oh, there's me.
The two things I think are going to be really important now is that, like with AI, the need to maintain a stable API is greater than ever, because you're not going to teach the LLM like, oh, we deprecated that API, stop writing that. Like, hypothetically, it could get better at these things, but...
Yeah, that's me. You guys probably know who I am if you're here. But we want to talk about React Fur. React Fur is an exploration largely led by Joe, who is one of the leads on the React compiler work. He has been going hard for a long time now, trying to make React's performance as good as possible. Compiler is one strategy, which is to optimize the code the developers wrote to make it as efficient as possible within React and the rules of React. But what if you can do similar things within React itself? Very good talk.
Despite what some folks are actually an example of efficient world of incremental computation. For those who aren't familiar, incremental computation is an umbrella term for software systems that can efficiently update their outputs when their inputs change. Common examples are things like spreadsheets. You change one cell, only the cells that are actually use that update. Build systems, and UI. React is an incremental UI system, despite what some folks might claim. Now, our approach on this was to create a series of benchmarks that are representative of different real-world scenarios. One of the challenges with benchmarks is obviously that you kind of end up focusing on one specific case, and we don't want to over-optimize because that's not representative, that one case isn't representative of all apps. So we created a whole bunch of different benchmarks. For this talk, I'm going to focus on just one, but I'll share kind of some of the broader results at the end. The draw benchmark.
Don't want to spend too much time on the specific test here. It renders a React logo by rendering a bunch of characters in a path, like one at a time. So it goes through one by one and renders each of them by having a higher up state object, like a context, that has updates that happen as quickly as they can. And every time the render completes, it adds the next thing. It's an interesting bench. It's really meant to just stress test how much throughput you can do with a higher level state solution like context or a global. Without it being a traditional global, it's just part at the top of the render tree. There's also a version of this bench that he does in a, or there's also a version of this bench that he does in a signals focused framework. Don't know if I'm supposed to say. It's solid. I may or may not have seen the code, and it's pretty much one-to-one port of the React version, but with a high up, and it still uses context in solid, just a very high up one in a way that you'd almost never do. This ended up in a lot of ways being a talk about data architecture and how it's just as important to keep track of how you're managing your data and your state in your apps as it is to render things and manage data like through your render tree the right way. Let's get to some of these fun results.
Context. So how much faster can we really get when every component has to update, at least somehow, right? Okay, so baseline, first the results for React. Now this version has minimal manual memoization. And remember, this is 5,000 interactions taking just shy of 4 seconds on my laptop. And here's the result for React compiler. Yeah. Not bad, right?
So the React compiler, it memoizes at every level, and I think he had a good diagram for this somewhere. It might come up later. But since you have the context, and it's rendering all of the entities and passing IDs to each entity, and then the entity has to pull from context its value, the tree for what is getting updated is pretty brutal. Yeah, he shows it here. The value that you get out of the compiler is that it can stop the update from going through at any given point via the memoization.
To make this type of application faster. So, first takeaway, React compiler can significantly improve the performance of context-based apps. Now, this is going to be a recurring question in this talk. Can we go faster? Yes. She's cheated. She's seen you saw the dry run. Doesn't count. Now, there's been a lot of noise about signals in the community.
I don't think noise is a fair way to refer to it, but I understand where you're coming from, Joe.
What if we use signals? I heard they're fast. So we built a prototype, a brand new approach to React, ground-up rewrite of the runtime using signals. Or, well, not quite signals, close. Pull-based or lazy incremental computation graph. We extended React compiler to emit the code for this. translating existing React components and hooks to use this new runtime. Pretty cool, right? I'll talk about how this works in a moment. Signals. We've heard so much about signals, and I'm sure you are all really, really excited. You excited to see the results? Want to see the results? Okay.
I was so nervous doing this.
Yeah. I'm just as excited to show them to you, and not for the reason you're expecting. Our results so far.
Yeah. Signals performed worse. So I almost feel like I have to go into a deeper dive on like how signals work. I've needed to for a while. The super simple TLDR version, as he talked about the lazy computing graph there. We go back to the diagram here. If this is like, you have the component that has its style at the bottom here that is determined by its width and its height, which is where how it knows how to and where to render. Traditionally in React, you would have this data at the top, somewhere high up in your component hierarchy, and it gets passed down through layers. And as a change occurs in that data, each layer gets the new data passed down to it. The way signals work is the opposite. Instead of from the top, data gets passed down, when data makes it to the end, it sets up a binding, almost like an event listener. And at the bottom, wherever this data is being consumed, in this case in style, because in the style tag for this element, we're setting the width and height based on the ones that are coming from context. When you set that up at that lower level, it'll create a binding to this entity such that when the entity changes, it goes through a list of all of the things relying on it and then updates those things. That's what they mean by pull-based. Instead of sending data down through the whole React component tree when it changes, every element that is touching something from state creates a binding when it touches that state so that it gets updated when the change occurs. Oh, I didn't know Ryan was still here. Awesome. Context doesn't impact what re-renders in solid. It's like if everything is an external store. Yes. So instead of the hierarchy of the data controlling what is rendering and re-rendering, the data exists externally and elements are bound to the data directly. So anything that changes gets updated itself. So in React, if we have this data in context, it has to go through each of the component layers. If I make like mock components for this, oh, look at that. YouTube chat died. Great. So if you had something like this, obviously this is like the hierarchy of how the components exist, not the way the data is actually passing through. If context provider had some value and this is being passed in as a sub value like this throughout, you get the idea. If the data goes to layer 1, then layer 1 mounts layer 2 mounts layer 3, and then something changes up here, like you have a use state up here, const value use state, cool. So you have this up here, you pass this value into the context provider, layer 1 consumes it, layer 2 consumes it, etc. The update has to go through each of the components to make sure any change isn't affecting that component. That's how React works. It is slow for the reasons that are hopefully intuitive to you, because it has to go through every single layer where something might be touched. This is why putting use states and context near the root of your app can be so destructive for performance, because if you put a use state at the top of your app and something changes, it has to go recompute every single layer throughout the React tree. This is a different way of showing essentially the same pattern. This is showing the data side, not the component side, but in React, the result's the same because your component hierarchy. But in React, the result's effectively the same thing because in React, the component hierarchy is the data hierarchy unless you're using external stores for said data. So you would expect signals to be faster in React because now you're not checking each layer between the thing that uses the data and the thing that holds the data. You can skip layers 2, 3, 4, whatever, and just change the thing at the bottom.
Translating existing our results, and we double check. So this is when we started to question our life choices. Maybe we're just not cut out for this. And then we regained our senses, and we double checked. OK, what if we just made a mistake? Because, that happens. So we took a signals-based virtual DOM-less library that scores well on popular benchmarks, and we ported draw to that library. The specific library doesn't really matter, as we'll see in a minute. Again, this is an experiment, so we're changing one variable at a time. So we're going to change the rendering, the rendering algorithm, so which means keeping the data model the same. So we use the same approach, state, passed down via context. And I want to call out, if you were to go and use a signals-based library, this isn't how they'd recommend storing your data, right? And so you might say that, oh, this is an unfair comparison. But the whole point is we're doing an experiment to compare, given this data model, what performance characteristics do we see given for this rendering model? So.
And again, the data model being bad and the rendering model having some performance optimization opportunities are two separate things that I think he does a really good job of separating in the talk, and I want to make sure I continue to honor that. The way that you manage the data is important, and the way you manage the way that you manage the data as the developer using this framework is important, and the rendering patterns that the framework itself uses are also important, but less so than you might think.
How's it look? OK. Maybe they're really fast, right? Signals are fast. All right. Our results so far? Wait, that wasn't, oh.
Yeah, I don't love how this is framed at a lot of points, like it should be fast, signals are fast, just unnecessary comments. But the core idea of the data model can trash almost any rendering model is really interesting.
Huh. Prototype.
Yeah, this is the important part.
So what's happening here? Well, in both our incremental prototype and in a typical signals graph, you end up with something that looks very vaguely like that. I got tired of drawing boxes and aligning them, so I'm sorry. That's the best you get today.
Real.
On the left, we have our context, which really there's a state going into the context, but you get the idea. There's one giant input, and then we have a whole lot of derived computation. And then over here on the right, we have our places where we're going to use these values in our UI tree. See, it looks sort of like a tree over there. So to propagate a change, we need two phases, because these nodes in the middle, we only want to compute them once, right? If a node has two inputs, we don't want to compute it twice, first with only half of the inputs updated, and then again when all the inputs are updated. We want to make sure we compute each node at the right time, only when its inputs have been updated. So there's a very specific set of nodes in this case, you need to pay close attention to this, that are affected when this context changes. So watch closely. It's all of them. OK, so first we'll just mark them as changed. We're not actually recomputing here. We're just marking them as changed. And then we'll go walk this tree and say, give me the latest value. And so we'll actually pull.
Oh boy, arguments potentially brewing in chat. Chill, guys. I want to bridge the gap here because I see both sides on this one. I've absolutely seen developers do what this is doing. So let me just make a new project for this quick. CD content, make dear signals wars. Bonix create Vite. I haven't created a context in a while. Not counter context. I want graph context demo. This will have type entity has ID string. Don't need the rest of this. Just going to do XY. Sure, we'll leave width and height in it. And this will have entities. Create entity. What's this mad about? Cool, that's all fine. Cool. Now we have a very, very rough version of this demo. I don't feel like fighting the definitions here. Just ignore the red lines. This is good enough. So the problem with this here is that we now need to, wherever we're consuming this, deal with the list of entities. So if I make the list component, and this is where all of these entities are rendered. Cool. There's an annoying problem here. Since the entities are rendered here as part of the whole group of entities, adding a new one requires you check all the old ones. So if this div was an expensive component to render, or there were theoretically a ton of these components to render, every time a new entity is added, or worse, an entity is changed, this here has to be recomputed. The result might be a no-op, but this layer here, going through all of the items, even if one item changed, this breaks. Since all of the items are rendered here through a check on this higher level entities, the result here is that any change to this results in everything changing. There are a lot of different data architectures to help you get around this reality, but this is reality. So it means if we go back to the diagram we had before, if this element changes, like let's say you change width or height of one of the entities, maybe you change width or height of entity 256 out of 5,000, all 5,000 nodes have to be re-rendered, even if it is opted out of really early via memoization, because this layer here, the one that maps all of these entities into the DOM, has broken when entities itself changes. The problem is that entities is an array, so any element in entities changing results in the whole array being busted. This is a bad data model that results in not performance solutions almost regardless, or this is a bad data model that results in bad performance in basically every rendering strat. And I've seen so much code written like this, it's hilarious. And in most cases, it's fine. But when you're intentionally pushing it as far as possible, this isn't going to be great. And that's why every render strategy struggles when you hoist the context up and then have everything in one array where any element changing busts the whole array.
Back along this tree. And so if there's a fancy algorithm here, you actually want to go depth first, and then if one of the nodes doesn't change, you kind of stop, and it's fancy. You can look it up on blog posts and stuff.
Apparently, the legend state example shows this. Legend state's really, really good, so it'll be a good reference. Look at that, a list of messages. Crazy. Why would that ever be relevant? Totally not a thing I've had to deal with a whole bunch. I wish I could hide the side nav here. Inspect. Okay, when I pull this up, it destroys that. Let me select this. Delete. Delete. How do I get rid of this spacing there? God damn it. Can I get rid of the... There we go. More space. That's what I wanted, but better. Okay, so here we have... Yeah. With legend state, you have an observable like helper that can take an array, and when you push something new, can debounce the change, so you don't end up with the whole array re-rendering. You do have to use their custom for component in order to handle this, because they will only update the element that has changed for you. It's not for as in for each. It literally is, but it will handle the diffing and the prevention of the update for you as well. So other solutions for state handle this in their own unique ways. There's a lot of good stuff in Legend worth referencing. It's a really good library. Jay is incredible. Back here, though.
But maybe ChatGPT can explain it to you. We're just going to skip over the high level here. But the point is, we're actually visiting the graph again.
Oh, one other good point from chat. Thank you, Rick. I'll show him this view. It's easier to see. The pithy way to explain Joe's point is that fine-grained updates aren't enough. You need fine-grained data modeling too. The nice thing about signals compared to context is that it's more common to do fine-grained data modeling. Absolutely agree there. I find that a lot of the performance comparisons that we see just aren't very good, because the performance comparisons are focused on what does it look like if you write the best code in each framework. And there are certain frameworks where the best code will be better, but there's also certain frameworks where more people are more likely to write the better code. And React is not one of those frameworks. The average React code base is a shit show, because the average React dev is just using React because it's what they were told to use. They didn't pick it. The average solid dev is way better. And on top of that, the patterns and mindset that and on top of that, and on top of that, the mindset that solid encourages is one where you're making things more fine-grained. You're using the built-ins to break up your data model in a better, more intelligent way. And the result is much better performance.
So we're visiting the whole graph, once to mark things as changed, and then once to recompute. So once you start thinking about it, you're like, that actually doesn't sound fast, does it? OK. So the signal style pull-based approach.
I can skip through this. I want to get to where he announces first.
The existing incremental computation literature wasn't getting us faster. But we have a lot of experience with incremental systems at Meta. In my 11 years at Meta, I've worked on Relay, which is an incremental in-memory data.
I need to include this part. Skip to here. Yeah.
Approaches can often, across all that experience, is domain-specific approaches can often outperform generic incremental approaches. Signals are a very general-purpose algorithm for incremental computation, but we can do something a bit more fancy. So fast forward at least a year. Numerous prototypes created and thrown away with, gotta say, amazing engineering work, incredibly clever designs that just did not pan out until we hit upon a variant that we're calling React Fur. It's a novel approach to incremental rendering that uses a hybrid eager-lazy algorithm. Now, it's important to note this prototype does not support all the features of React, but it does support a lot of common patterns, more than enough to render the draw benchmark. That said, before you get too excited, this is a constrained prototype. It is a long way away from shipping. But we wanted to see, if we do kind of strip things down to the core, how fast can we make it? And that was the idea here. So this time, you're probably excited for the right reason. Yeah. Couple years of work to get there. We were pretty impressed, pretty happy. Now, a new React code name, a novel incremental algorithm. You probably have a lot of questions. You have questions? Yeah. OK. I guarantee the one you're thinking of is not this. That's right. We're just going to move.
The can we go faster joke was really good. He didn't give much info on Fur. I don't know how far they plan to go with it. But again, there's the two pieces. Thus far, everything has been this rough data model where everything is in the same single array that all of the components and all of the entity bindings have to check from. What if you fix the data model? How do things change?
Propagating updates. But what if we change the data model? So throw it all away, back to the basics, React. React compiler, a simple external store. What do I mean by that? Well, we'll define a store that looks something like this. It's got a get function to look up the current value of a drawing entity, a function to subscribe for updates to that value, and a way to publish updates to a few records at a time. And then we'll write a little hook that lets us read and subscribe to this store. Basically, I'm writing my own use sync external store here. There's a bunch of to-dos, but you get the idea. All right, so again, our results so far. And now, oh wait, that's right.
Yeah. He changed the title to be comparison because now the data model is different, so it's not really an experiment.
I forgot. Point of the comparison, but still, what are the results?
Yeah. Case in point, fixing your data model, moving the store externally, and then binding the things that need to update to that external store instead of going through the entire render tree to get it there is significantly better. There was anything too important? Yeah. The actual signals implementation is already at this amazing perf today. Interesting. Potentially, I'd be very curious to see like you're effectively DIYing signals when you do the external store to an extent, but you're subscribing by hand. So updates only trigger when the subscription gets updated. So instead of a subscription occurring whenever you access the data, like if we were to do this in solid, we would bind directly. It would be like the for component, each entities would be hit as a function, which is what creates the binding. That's the difference, and that's where the binding is created. But if we don't want to bind there, if we just bind inside of the elements directly, like in this code, we bind the subscription to updates to this entity, then other entities will not trigger anything. Hypothetically.
Oh yeah, and we didn't. We barely. We slightly rewrote things to use a store, but we're not like dramatically rewriting the code. And in particular, because of the subscribe function, we can do very targeted updates in this store. So why is this so fast? Well, if we go back to the incremental computation graph that we looked at for kind of the signal style graph, the issue was that the context was kind of upstream of everything, and so when that changed, too much work downstream got invalidated. When we shift to a store, it's kind of like we can see inside that context. And so now, when one entity changes, we're just invalidating way less work and doing a lot less downstream. But we're far enough along in the talk that you know what I'm going to say next. Yeah, there you go. All right. In particular, what if we combine these ideas? Because I just said when we changed the rendering algorithm and we changed the data model, I'm like, can't you do both? You can. So React for similar external store. Here's where we are so far. Yeah.
I will say, I would virtually guarantee if we did the same data architecture change, that solid would be even smaller on this. Regardless, I think this talk has highlighted the point that your render strategy isn't going to take a slow app and make it faster if the reason it's slow is the data model, which historically speaking, the majority of the applications I have seen that are running terribly, that are built in React, aren't because React's render model is slow. It's because the state management that they chose to do and the way that their data model's architected is really bad. This does not need to be in the video. Ryan, I haven't had a chance to tell you this yet because I've been way too fucking busy. Joe's down to chat with you and share notes. I can make the group chat right now before I forget. I added him on Discord specifically to do this, and then both of us forgot. If you just want to chat with him to make the best possible public version of this, he's interested. Anyways, yeah. Cool. I'm going to make that group chat quick before I forget to, because of who I am as a person. God, I hate Discord sometimes. Oh. He has not accepted my friend request. I will message him so he does. Cool. Just requested. I will make the group chat once he accepts. Anyways, yeah. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I will now. This should not be treated as an announcement, as confirmation that certain work is going to be done or that something's going to come to React. This is meant to be an exploration, and what Joe's doing here is meant to be sharing the exploration work that they've been doing. On one hand, in order to get people to stop replying to them, but have you looked at Signals yet? I bet Signals would make React faster. And on the other hand, to try and show that they are putting a lot of work in here to share their findings and start a hopefully better conversation that might, maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, lead to developers being more aware of the data model they're using for their state and thinking about it a little more deeply instead of just shoving thousands of entities into a context and being mad when their apps are slow. Yeah. Because that's what ends up happening more often than not. The vast majority of the time I hear people complaining about React and I go look at the code, they're doing nasty stuff with state that would be slightly harder in other frameworks. Absolutely. It would be 10 to 50% faster in other frameworks, perhaps, but it wouldn't solve the data architecture problem unless they solve it themselves. So Fur is not a new thing that you should expect to install in your React apps so much as a really good exploration that the team did to showcase what they're thinking about, how they're working, and reset the conversation that we're having about React performance.
I did not believe that number when I saw it. Really hope it's right. Okay, now this is the point where we have to go back. Remember how I emphasized the highly, like triple, highly, super simplified at the beginning of the talk? This is a highly simplified benchmark. That makes it really great for optimizing the innermost workings of the rendering algorithm, but it also makes it less representative of real-world scenarios. So we also created other benchmarks that have a richer set of components and a more realistic data model. The draw was basically a key value store, as we saw. Now, these other benchmarks are, again, not all the way to a real app, but they're much more representative, and the results there were not quite as good. So this is a different benchmark, again, with React compiler in a store, and then React Fur in a store. And we can see that it is still a performance improvement, but not quite the same magnitude as we were seeing on the Draw app, right? This is just as we increase the complexity of our app, the rendering algorithm just becomes less critical to the performance. And there's just only so much we can actually make faster. And there's another aspect, too. Yes, it's faster, but it's not the full React. All right? And from a couple of years of experiments, we know that adding back some features that people rely on every day with React would, or at least could, eat into these wins. All right, but.
Okay, I'll let him make his joke here because it's a good joke.
What am I asked next? No. No, it's time for a break. Okay.
Very good cut for the end of his talk. I agree with this a lot, Ryan. The idea that, like, how do I put it? The idea that somebody would line for line rewrite the React version in Solid is not real at all. you would be much more likely to do this correctly in Solid than you would be in React due to the nature of the frameworks and the primitives that they provide. To Joe's credit, Solid was not mentioned at any point. It was more meant to be used as a reference for a good signals implementation with the existing bad data model. It is out of respect for Solid that it was used for this, because Solid is a really good implementation of signals. And if the goal is to take a bad data model and see if signals fixes it or not, Solid is the best way to check that. But the way the talk's presented does feel like a bigger dunk on signals that it needs to be, because I would bet that in that final realistic benchmark here, if you wrote this benchmark, the React way, the React with an external store way, and the Solid.js way, Solid would have the best numbers by far. And I'm really excited for source code for these things to come out so that we can have a conversation as a community about all of this, because that will certainly be its own dedicated video in the future, but it's already taken up too much of this video and there's other things we have to talk about. So let's go to everything else. One sec, check in, see if anything here. Nope, cool. Back to it. Oh, and of course, if you want more info on all of this, the person you're looking for is Ryan. Ryan does a stream every Friday and goes deep on these things. He did one 2 weeks ago with Ricky, who is here, and he just did one about all of the stuff going on, both with the React conference as well as with Remix v3, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And the first half of this stream was all about the signal stuff. So check that out. Check out his follow-ups, and I'm sure he'll do once we have more of this data and once we have these benchmarks out or recreate them ourselves. I was really tempted to recreate them myself, but haven't had any free time at all. We got to go back in for the next pieces. Have I not VIP'd? I VIP'd Ryan. Ryan's absolutely VIP'd. I should VIP Rick, though. Okay. And now we have React Router with server components. I made some bold claims earlier about this, and I'm going to defend them. I'm tempted to show Ryan, or I'm really tempted to show the talk that our friend, or I'm really tempted to show the talk that Kent did about this, but you should go check that out yourself if you're interested. I'm just going to show you guys the magic directly. Cool. Run dev. Cool. We now have a real basic React Router app. Right now, these components run on the client. It's really easy to confirm this by going into the client, finding some random route. Here are routes, home TSX. And here, console.log, we are home. And if I go to the browser and we open up the browser console, you'll see we are home gets logged because we are home is rendering in the browser. Let's say we have some complex components. We'll do function, complex, children. This will return, sure. And we render a bunch of these. Long array equals, okay, well, I don't need that many things. We'll do 100 entities. Long array.map, complex children key equals item, cool. And now this should render all of these. And if I put a log in the complex component, console.log complex children, we will see this logs 100 times because it's in there 100 times. Cool. If we're pretending this is actually complex or it's doing some actual work, not something we necessarily want on the client. What's really cool with the new server component stuff in React Router is how easy it is to turn on and then how easy it is to adopt in different ways depending on what you're specifically looking for. So we hop over to the Vite config and we switch to unstable React. All right, it's not. What is it under? It's not an experimental version, right? Okay, they have a separate template for this. I'll just go and net that quick. Okay, there we go. So the way you move over is you switch from the React Router config. So we have React Router here, standard from React Router dev Vite. That. Close that. Close that. Cool. And that. Yeah. And we switch this over to use the unstable React Router RSC. It's just bound here to give the name something a little bit cleaner. Cool. That's the change. Is this a different like experimental version of React Router, or can I just copy paste that? React Router. Okay, it looks like I should just be able to copy paste it. Let me do that. See if it works. Cool. And now, oh great. What's going wrong? Okay, I'm just going to use theirs instead. I tried. Oh, so I need the RSC as well. That's what it was, almost certainly. I'm stupid. Should be an error for that. I also need the plugin installed. Screw it. I'm just going to go with the other code base that already has it all working. App, routes, home, yoink, yoink. Not using that anymore. Cool. Now this is rendering. Now we have complex children. Still everything's the same though. Cool. So we turned on server components. Where are server components? There's a couple ways we can access them. Here is the unique way that they do that I think is really cool. Right now we're returning this data from the loader, so we could have like use loader data and get some stuff here. So if we want const data, we have to import use loader data. I don't think it's smart enough to type this, but the type is whatever we return from here. So if I console log that here, we'll see that the data we get back is not showing there, huh? Let me comment this out, just clean up the logs a bit. Okay, data coming back is null. What am I doing wrong with that? I haven't used, oh, that's just meta? Oh, that's meta, oh, my bad. Export function loader. Thank you guys. Cool. Yeah, meta is not loader. I'm just used to the remix pattern of having the one loader function up top and occasionally the mutation as well. Cool. So we have meta for the metadata for the page. Then we have loader, which returns that message. And if we go here, you'll see we have message, hello from loader. Awesome. But let's say we don't want to get some, let's say we don't just want data here though, because we can use this with a fetcher to go get data from a database. We can run this on the server. There's a lot of things we can do in the loader. Let's say we just want to render all of these complex components. So if I uncomment that, you'll see this is all happening on client. Let's do it. we take this content, move this up as well for posterity's sake. And then in here, we will render data.content. I'm not handling keys properly. That's fun. Oh, key is item. I need it to be the index. Cool. There we go. And now the log doesn't happen on client because all of this data is coming from the server loader. So these components are rendering on server. So they can't be interactive, but if you don't need them to be, if you have some data that's static, there you go. Now that static data is handled on the server side, and the client side can do whatever you need to. You could still do client side code here. Count, set count, use state, and I'll create a counter underneath. And now on the same page, I have to import use state. And now on the same page, I can have client-side components. The root component, by the way, like the root of this page, home here, is a client-side component, but it's getting loader data from the server side, which rendered some data in it there. So now some parts of our app are static and server rendered, and some app parts are dynamic and client rendered. Traditionally with server components, you've needed to wrap the entire app with the server component because it has to come from root. That is still kind of happening here because React Router does own the whole React tree, so to speak. But what's really interesting about this implementation is that I take off my headphones, they're screwing with me. What's really interesting about this implementation is that you can much more, on the dev side, piecemeal some parts server, some parts client. An example where this would be really useful is if you have a page that's like your terms and conditions page. If you're doing that on client components, now you have that data on the server and the client, and the result is that you have it in your HTML and in your JS, which isn't ideal. If you move to this pattern for certain things, now that data can be server-side exclusively, and it only comes down in the HTML. You don't need the components to manage all of that. But let's say you don't want to use the loader pattern. You like the more traditional method that exists within the new Next.js React stuff. We'll make a new route for hardcore. Is what I'll name this one. Cool. Hardcore. I have to go add this to routes. It's not going to do the thing where it auto updates. I don't think it will. Does this ever say, like, how do the, I'm not as familiar with the new, like, framework mode React Router, like how it binds routes. Okay, here. That's what I thought. Route. And it needs a path. Cool. Handled. Oh, I got the order wrong. Cool. Check here. Cool. So let's do the same thing again in this new file. But I don't want to do it through here anymore. I don't want the loader at all. Export default async function. And then in here where we have data.content, do that. And now when I refresh, oh, an error. An unknown component is an async client component. Only server components can be async. Yes, good error. Better than what we would get in Next.js, funny enough. That's because we have our useState here, and this useState call is going to turn this into a client component. In fact, many hooks will. We don't need the data anymore because we're not using it, so I'll just remove that. But we do want that counter. So how do we handle that? I'll make a new file, components/counter, TSX. We don't need a custom hook for this. We'll yoink that. We will yoink this bit. Make it a fragment. Cool. And now we can go mount this here instead. Gotta import, save, load, and still an error? Oh yeah, there's one last thing we forgot. Use client. And now, did I leave it? No? That should be good now. It's because that's imported. Is it that this isn't async? Nope. That should have just worked. Export server component? Does that have to have a special name? Let me just check this part. I think it was before Tanner, if I recall. Where is it? I know it was this day. Can't have been that early because I was there for it and I did not get there very early. Oh, here he is. Should probably be in the docs if this is true. Ah, that's the piece I missed. You have to export a server component instead of a default export. That's a little silly. That actually hurts a bit. Yeah, I don't like magic names. That this is the first, like, oh, I'm less sure about this solution now moment I've had. That's really silly. Don't love that. But everything's fixed now. We have our counter. We have our server component. It's all happening here. Anything rendered here that isn't marked as use client is going to render on the server, so that we are home log is not going to happen here. We're seeing server logs pass through of complex children. This should not have occurred here. This should just happen server side because it's a server component. Am I on the right route? Oh, I'm on the wrong route. Okay, I was being stupid. A couple times over now. Yeah, cool. Sorry, cut all that. Yeah, don't like the naming, but here we are. We are home, complex children. These are happening on the server. That's why it has that prefix. It passes the logs over, but there is no client log happening here. And we still have the interactivity with the click me at the bottom here that behaves as expected. Don't love the magic variable names, but that's the only issue I have here. The rest is actually quite good. I'm impressed. I think this is the path forward for most people to adopt server components for a lot of different things, because a lot of apps have some amount of static on the outside. Let's say some of your routes need specific fonts and others don't. That can now be handled here. Let's say some routes need to fetch some data before they render anything and others don't. That can be handled here. Let's say some routes have a giant component with a ton of text that isn't interactive at all. You can do that here, and you don't have to manage that in the JavaScript anymore or wait for another network request. This gives you a really solid starting point for getting some data out of React, some rendering out of React, and either making it static and loaded from a CDN, or making it dynamic and loading it from a server so that you don't need to load so much JavaScript on the client. This is a really happy path to get there for most apps. And if you want some of the benefits of server components without moving everything to App Router and Next.js, we have a much happier path to do that here. I honestly see a way for a company like Twitch, knowing the chaos that is the Twitch web code base, they could actually start adopting server components for some things by moving over to this pattern. Really, really cool. Cool. And now we have React Native. For what it's worth, there wasn't too much new things announced with React Native so much as the path forward for existing things. All new Expo projects and all new React Native projects initted today will be starting with the new async bridge. It's not even an async bridge anymore. It's a synchronous bridge. I learned a really fun piece of information about this bridge when I was there. If you're not familiar, the way that React Native and Native communicate is through a bridge that allows for React Native to send messages to the native layer. That bridge is async, and the reason why was actually really funny to learn. The reason it started as an async bridge is they wanted the ability to debug the JavaScript using Chrome on your computer when you were testing your native device. So if you normally have a device, like your phone, and in here you have like the native bindings, so here we'll say like this is AppKit or whatever, and then you have React Native, which is where all your JavaScript is here. These have to communicate. If this is like your phone, React Native has to send commands to AppKit, and AppKit has to respond. It's not quite this simple. AppKit's wrapped with a ton of different things. The binding between them is super complex, but you get the general idea. React Native is sending commands to something in native and then getting responses. There's no memory sharing. This is just an event message passing system. This could have been done synchronously, though, because you do have direct access to all of this. But if you want to get your logs on another device, like Chrome on dev machine, you could pass the logs over to the dev machine, but you're not going to get the level of granularity for debugging that most people would want. The fun thing that Fuchs, Christopher, creator of React Native and Prettier, and a ton of other random things, including Excalibur, the app I'm using for drawing all of this out, Fuchs has touched fucking everything in the space. It's crazy. If you wanted to debug the React and JavaScript part using Chrome DevTools, you can. They never went very far with this, but it was a thing that people used for a little bit. But in order for you to do a network hop to get the command over to native and vice versa, this now has to be async. And a significant portion of why the bridge between React Native and the native bindings on most platforms was asynchronous is because it had to have the ability to do the network hop, thereby making it asynchronous. This is a thing that Vuix and others have, this is a thing that both Vuix and others have expressed immense regret about, and it took years for them to rebuild the bridge in the layer between the native engines and the native layers on your platform and React, to the point where they now call it bridgeless because you're just accessing values directly in the native code, and it is comically faster for a ton of different things. It's now stable enough that it's the recommended solution everywhere. It's what they're using everywhere. It's gotten really, really good. And a lot of those performance issues we were concerned about with React Native have been destroyed immediately through the removal of that bridge. This is a thing that's been going on for a while. I've talked about it in many other videos, but seeing it on stage said, nope, we're done. This is ready. You can use it today. This is the default going forward. Huge. And a lot of poor library authors have had to maintain two versions of their libraries for things like fancy animations. One would use the old architecture, one would use the new architecture. And companies like Shopify have been maintaining their libraries for both, but now have went all in on the new bindings. I know that this came up a bit at the start here. Yeah, they're also overhauling React Native DevTools, which is super necessary. They're moving to a standard DOM API, which should allow us to share a lot more between web and mobile. As they said, React Native is native, but it's aligned with the web. Let's just hear this part because it's cool.
So that's why today starting from React Native 0.82, it's time to make the new architecture the only architecture. Or more simply, the React Native architecture. Having a single architecture has a lot of benefits, of course. The first one that we discover is bundle size reduction. So in our preliminary test, we have seen an improvement in bundle sizes for React Native up to 1 megabyte. And the second benefit is build time reduction. In iOS, for example, where we don't have precompiled binaries as default just yet, our example application went from 300 seconds to build to 140 seconds. Having a single architecture gives you a simpler mental model for you as an app developer or a library maintainer. You don't have to worry about the next library that you want to use in your app, whether it will work with the current architecture of your app.
If you guys on the web think that new React updates are annoying to maintain in your projects, you have no idea how much worse it is in React Native. And things are so much better now. I want to find, there was a slide somewhere about how much faster things were for Shopify. That might have been much later on. Was that in the Expo talk? Maybe not. What was it in? I don't know if there's going to be a transcription when it's this long. Yeah, no transcription on this. This is old. Here we are, yeah. Did they not have a chart showing the difference? I thought there was a chart somewhere where they showed how much better performance was once they made the move. I can't find it. Oh shit, Tom is here. Wrong button. Here we are. VIP Tom Ochino. New different architecture. New bridge. The last sync communication was just one piece. Good shit. Good to see you, Tom. Thanks for stopping by. I'm not going to hunt to find that, but there have been a lot of apps that moved over to the new architecture that have been very successful with it. The performance wins are crazy. The tooling stuff is really good now for dev tools in particular. Performance is a core priority for the team. And there's one last big piece of the performance stuff, which is the next thing on my list. Static Hermes. Hermes, however you're supposed to pronounce it. Every time I hear someone on or off the team say it, they say it a different way. Hermes is the engine that is used for JavaScript in React Native. It's similar, it's an alternative to something like V8 that has different goals. Hermes is trying to be the fastest runtime for JavaScript, starting from nothing. like spinning it up as quick as possible, getting everything you need into memory, and launching your app faster because you don't have an engine already running like you do on other platforms. When you're building an app with Node, the assumption is that Node's already running and it's loading your code. When you're building something on Cloudflare, the assumption is that the Node is, or when you're building on Cloudflare, the assumption is that V8 is already running and you're building code on top of it. When you're running an application in the web, you already have an engine running and you're just throwing JavaScript at it. But on mobile, there is no shared JavaScript runtime that you can just load JS code into. And if there was, it would be a shit show because every mobile app is going to behave entirely differently. Which means that for a long time, most React Native apps would embed V8 in them to be the JavaScript engine. But V8 does not init really fast. It does not handle memory as well as you might want it to. It's a great, incredible engine that does things that are unfathomable. There's a reason everyone's building their shit around it. But it wasn't the right solution for mobile apps that need a fast launch time. Which is why the React team and many others since have been investing heavily in, which is why the React team and many around them have invested heavily in Hermes in order to make a better engine for the needs of mobile applications. And now they're going way further with static Hermes. There was one last announcement with Hermes I want to make sure that we cover here. I think that was the next talk, right? Was it not? I'm trying to find the Hermes v1. I was not awake for this part, and then I had to go do a bunch of other random shit, so I do not know when exactly it happened. Is there no talk specific to it? Where the fuck was it? Oh, here we are. Found it.
Of React Native, we didn't talk about over the keynote today. And this thing is Hermes. Hermes is our JavaScript engine tailored specifically to improve performances of React Native application. And today, we have another announcement for you guys. And that is Hermes v1. Hermes v1 is the next evolution of our JavaScript engine with improvements on the virtual machine and the compiler for better performance. It is the foundation for just-in-time compilation and JavaScript to native compilation, something that we presented in the past couple of years under the name of Static Hermes.
I want to find Sebastian did a really funny post about this. I don't know if it was his, but here it is. Hermes, static Hermes, Hermes 2.0, Hermes v1. Oh, man. Oh, man.
As I mentioned that Hermes v1 comes with performance improvement, but here are the data to prove that. We run Hermes v1, comparing it against the current version of Hermes with a set of synthetic benchmark from the JavaScript ecosystem, and we have seen Hermes v1 outperforming current version of Hermes across the board, and with an average improvement of 60%. But as Joe Savona mentioned yesterday during his talk, synthetic benchmark only tells part of the story, right? So we also try to enable Hermes v1 in a real-world, complex application, which is completely open source, the Expensify app. And we measure a few metrics, such as total time to interactive, bundle time loading, and content time to interactive. And we have seen improvements in Hermes v1 against current version of Hermes up to 9%. We also run the same test using low-end Android devices, and we have seen similar improvements on the same metrics, up to 7.6%.
The bundle time being 1.5 seconds and time to interact being 6+ seconds on an old Android phone hurts me deeply. But yeah. Since this is its own JavaScript engine, there's a lot of features that are not included or weren't included, but they've caught up a ton. A lot of React Native apps will be bundled and polyfilled to all hell in order to get around the fact that Hermes has fewer features, but we're getting a lot closer. They didn't even have async functions until recently, which is kind of crazy.
The casting those features in your TypeScript code, but today they are going through Babel plugins and polyfills. Hermes v1 supports those natively. That means that we can get rid of all the polyfills and embrace smaller bundles and faster loading time for your app. Is available starting today as an experimental feature in React Native 0.82. Integration.
Is there anything about static Hermes here? There is not. Okay, I thought there was something about static here. I want to be very clear about this. Hermes, the runtime, is not static Hermes, the super cool, powerful, modern engine. Static Hermes, or retake on that bit. Hermes, the engine we just talked about, the thing that's an alternative V8, is not static Hermes, which is an attempt to compile our JavaScript code to be assembly, to be native code. Static Hermes is not something that we expect people to run on their entire app. You're not going to compile your whole app down to native using it. What it could be used for is compiling specific libraries and other things that benefit a lot from best-in-class performance. For example, some of the state management libraries we use, some of the animation libraries we use, or potentially the React compiler itself. There's been a lot of talk about how we can make React compiler faster and easier to integrate with other tools since everything else is moving to Rust. React compiler being in Babel is kind of annoying. Wouldn't it be cool if we could take the JavaScript that runs across all of that and compile it down to native? Be a really nice potential feature where we can still write JavaScript and the result is super fast. We might be limited about what things we are and aren't allowed to touch. You might not be able to just import any library freely, but if more of our dependencies can be written in the right subset of TypeScript to be compiled down to assembly, those can now be run alongside our applications to speed up the things that are the most annoying in our code bases. Yeah. Thank you, Gabriel, for finding this. I was looking for this earlier. 10% faster Android launch times with the new architecture with React Native. Really good stuff. So the combination of the overhaul of the actual runtime and the changes to how React Native binds to that native layer has resulted in pretty significant performance wins across the board and certain patterns that would have made no sense before, making a lot more sense because the bridge is cheaper now, which is huge. No worries, Gabriel. Appreciate you a ton. I think that covers most of these things. What is left is Remix v3. And sadly, we don't have much information on it. The talk on the Remix v3 talk occurred on Friday when React Conf was Wednesday and Thursday, if I recall, or was it Tuesday, Wednesday? Let me double check, just get my dates right. Yeah, sorry. So React Conf was Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Remix Conf was Friday the same week. So there was just a lot going on. But Remix v3 has moved off of React entirely. They're still using JSX, but they're building their own layer for doing updates. Instead of your components updating when the data changes, you have to call this.update in the components. Very different mental model, really trying to lean into web standard stuff. It's also the only framework I've seen showcasing this, like the keyword this, in modern history. So we will save Remix v3 for when they have actual documentation out so I can play with it properly instead of speculatively like I would have to right now. It's not a React framework anymore, though, so it barely even fits in here. Also, ViteConf, yeah, it's been crazy. It was a wild week. So much happened in the web dev world. I'm doing my best to keep up with it all. I just got the Bun 1.3 video out. We're getting this one out right after. What a chaotic set of stuff. Again, no one massive thing, but a bunch of these small to medium-sized things that resulted in a much clearer picture of what the future of React looks like. We're really focused on how we take the focus is a little hard to describe, but the best I can put it, we're trying to find out how to make the React code we already have run faster and better, while also making React simpler to write without changing the way we write it too much. The biggest thing in here that changes the actual syntax in the code we're writing is view transitions and async React. And if all goes well there, it will be a pure simplification of our code bases. But everything else here shouldn't change how we write code. It should just change how well our code runs and how powerful and performant our applications are. And hopefully we don't have to relearn anything, because then the AI is going to have to relearn it too. Yes, I actually made it this far without saying the word AI. Aren't you proud? We're what, like 2 hours in? Yeah. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. What a chaotic journey it's been. Hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did. And until next time, peace, nerds. Fun. Oh, what do you have for me from Tanner? Oh yeah, more of the Astro Tanner collabs. Cool. I don't have time to look into new stuff today. We're already so behind. Anchor lib. I just don't get why I would want to abstract my state in a way that it works with every framework. Like, I'm not, if I am using multiple frameworks in one app, then I'm doing it with like islands, and I don't want the state to be shared unless it's being shared in the URL. I just don't see the use case for this. Like, this feels like tech demo of the state management library. It's going to be a bit chaotic to edit down. We will do our best. Shout out to FaZe for figuring that one out for us. I think we got to do these vibe coding dying. Is there anything else like big-ish that I should have to cover right now? I can't do Vite Plus because there's almost no information out about it yet. Can't do Remix v3 for the same reason. Twitch's URL thing's bad. It can't handle dot engineering, I think. Yeah. It's too long a TLD. Aiden, fix it. The TLD checking code is really bad. Anything that's like even a fake .tld will become a link right now because it's not actually checking for real TLDs. It's just checking if there is the right amount of text after, and if there isn't, it just does that. Yeah. That's why if you do a .js in Twitch chat, it does the same thing. The URL parsing is fucking garbage. So if you're going to touch it, you should fix it. And if you're going to fix it, it's going to take you a while. Shut the fuck up. Anyways, thank you, Shamu, for throwing a gift over to Pronch. Thank you, Aiden, for resubbing so you can make your reacting to React Conf joke. We got NYC here with the tier 1, MJC Dev with the 30 months, Benji Mac 93 with the 4, NMG throwing a gift to Tomo. Appreciate that a ton. And then Riet here with the 3 months. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for the support. Tomo, you do not need to gift subs, man. Appreciate you a ton, but you did not need to do that. Thank you all so much for the support. As always, the React team are bros. It's awesome having them hang here. Finally, Tomo gets to see how I create my videos live for the first time. Super, super fun. I do got to run at 8, so I only got like an hour left, and I feel like I can get this one out in that amount of time. Peace, Gabriel. Thanks for stopping by. Let's do it. Now, to get started. I did not do my hair enough today, and I'm regretting that. Anyways. Vibe coding's been a pretty crazy trend. I feel like I'm seeing it everywhere, from books to shit posts to just the entirety of my Twitter feed. It must have taken over the web, right? Like, these companies are making so much money, which is why... Huh? Lovable's user count have dropped by 50% almost in the last couple months. That's a bit scary. Oh boy. We have a lot to dive into here, don't we? Maybe vibe coding was just a trend after all. Maybe vibe coding is a bad term. Maybe Lovable is a bad business. We have a lot to dive into here. Before we do that, though, I do want to do some quick disclaimers. I'm an investor in two of the companies here, Lovable and Bolt. I have no financial ties to Replit, V0, or Emergent, even though you guys seem to think I'm a huge for sale simp. I do think V0 is the most usable of these products right now, but they all have their strengths and weaknesses. We're not here to talk about any of those things. We're here to talk about the entire market of vibe coding and how valuable and viable all of these products are as a marketplace. And I'm about to shit on two of my investments a whole bunch, so this is going to be an expensive video. As I said before, I am invested in two of these companies, but 0 of them pay me at the moment. Someone's got to. Quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive in. Cool. Before we go too deep on this, I want to give credit where it's due to the source, which is Chris Prasarki, who works at Crust Data, which is a recent YC company. They do a lot of calculating data based on web traffic patterns, whatnot. It's hard for them to know for sure how much traffic a service is getting when they don't own the service. So these numbers are all speculative, some amount. That said, they put a lot of work into it. We're going to do our best to cover it. What's fucking happening? Let's do a new scene here. Cool. So to be very locked in on what we're talking about here, the idea of vibe code as they are describing it, and as we are talking about in this context, isn't just hitting tab or using traditional tools like Cursor to help you write code as a developer. What we're talking about are web applications for building applications that are meant to be used by non-developers, people who not only won't read the code, but can't because they don't know how, they don't have the experience. People like our parents, people like our friends and family that are outside of tech, putting together one-off applications to solve whatever random problems they might have. So to be very, very clear, we are talking about web apps or building small apps as a person who is not a dev and cannot really read code. There's a lot of different definitions about vibe coding. I have a whole video where I complain about this. But we're not talking about the different definitions. If you are upset that this is how we're defining it today, you can go watch another video. But we're going to do our best to go in detail on the vibe coding app building trend because it's a very interesting one. Let's start with this post, and then we'll go deeper from there. Is Lovable dying? Web traffic's declined almost 50% from 35.5 million users in June to a bit under 20 million in September. This trend can be seen across other big vibe coding tools like Replit and Bolt. Here's why I think this is happening. Point one, the viral wave has passed. Spring and summer hype, especially with Lovable's June peak, pulled in lots of non-devs on monthly passes. They experimented with the tool and never returned. The cultural conversation has also shifted from AI can build an entire app back to a more realistic view of AI's limitations. I do not agree with that part, but we'll talk about that later. Not as in I think that this one or the other side here is correct. I don't think that the cultural conversation has actually shifted. I think a lot of people are still claiming AI can do everything. Don't agree with the commentary on the culture here. Point two, power users eating up compute. A small group of power users burn through compute budgets. To protect margins, platforms have had to throttle usage and raise prices. This scared away hobbyists and experimenters, reducing the casual exploration that inflated spring traffic. Also don't agree with that. There are parts here that are right, but the framing is wrong. Point 3, Lovable needs to monetize. After raising 200 million, Lovable raced to monetize, tightening free credit limits and ending the generous 50% off discounts. This friction dulled its appeal for casual builders. Probably, but not as much as they seem to imply. And point 4, in May, V0 lost 500K, which is 10% of their web traffic, after moving from $20 a month to usage-based credits. Casual users found their balance disappearing in hours, which led to outrage. Point 5, Replet's missteps. They once thrived on their free tier and always-on REPLs, but over the years, the free education plans have been discontinued, always-on has been removed from basic plans, etc. A high-profile AI agent failure occurred in July, which was when they accidentally deleted a database, and user trust took a hit. Okay, I figured out what's wrong with this post. This post is really tech Twitter-brained, which is funny because it's on LinkedIn. But it seems like this post is making a lot of decisions and a lot of assumptions based on what they see people talking about in their circle on Twitter, which is not what any of this is about. This is about people like our parents, not people like our coworkers. And here we get to the one point I really agree with that I'm going to be focusing on. AI coding is losing its novelty. AI code is being absorbed into mainstream tools. Okay, I agree with the first sentence here and not the rest. GitHub, Copilot, Cursor, etc. are all integrating into our IDEs instead of being used via web-first vibe coding sites. Oh God, they're referencing Firebase Studio. Oh boy. Okay. So that's the original post. I respect them for their data and agree with some of the concepts of the points they're touching on, but the majority of these points are way too Twitter-brained and not very reality. So we're going to reframe all of this. There are 2 reasons people use a tool. I'll reword this. There are 2 reasons that people try things. Reason 1, they solve a problem for the person. Seems pretty obvious. If you have a problem and someone gives you a solution, you're going to try the solution. But then there's reason 2. This is the less intuitive one. Novelty. I didn't get this for a long ass time, but this has become a huge part of my life as a content creator. People seem to think that if you have a video that performs surprisingly well as a YouTuber, Instagram, whatever you're on, that what you should do next is the same topic again. It makes a lot of sense. If I mostly talk about, I don't know, React, and I do one video about Svelte instead, and that Svelte video does really well, obviously I should talk about Svelte more. And yes, I probably should talk about it more, but with enough space between instances. Because a huge part of why a Svelte video would perform well on my channel isn't because Svelte itself is so interesting, it's the novelty. The novelty of a new Svelte video, which there are fewer of, the novelty of a Svelte video on my channel, which is unique in and of itself. Novelty is a huge selling point for things. People like to try things, especially things that make them feel smarter, better, more capable, more potentially successful, more interesting. People like to do novel things. Different people like different amounts of novelty in their life, but everyone likes to do a thing they couldn't do before or learn about a thing they might not have learned about before. It makes you feel better. So another way to frame this is reason 1 is this thing will make you better and help you solve real problems. Reason 2 is things that make you feel better and feel more capable. Which is a big part. So why are we talking about this? Let's think about where the tools we use every day fit here. I would argue that a tool like React, the framework, fits up here. Not many people pick React because it's super exciting and fun, especially right now. Initially, a lot of people picked React for the novelty and the uniqueness and the potential, but they were mostly picking React, especially nowadays, because it's solving a problem and it's the default solution. What about Svelte or Solid? I would make the argument that those right now largely fall under novelty, at least for the reason that you're first trying it. You might have frustrations with React. You might just be tired of React. You might just be looking for something different. And you go look at these other solutions because you're looking for something different. This is why even though in my replies on a platform like Twitter, I see like 20 to 30% more replies about React than about Solid and Svelte. But if we go look at the NPM install charts, it's like a 20 to 30x gap. Probably more than that, honestly. Because the novelty makes it more fun to talk about the thing, to engage with the thing, to play with the thing, but not to make it part of your day-to-day workflow. To go back to this post, this is why I really disagree with the rest of this section. AI coding is being absorbed into mainstream tools is not a comment on novelty. These are different products with different spaces and different goals. No one is trying to make the decision between GitHub Copilot, Cursor, and other things like Lovable and V0. I've never in my life sat down and thought, should I be using Lovable or Cursor for this? No one is. That's not how reality works. Cursor is for people who want to edit code. Lovable is for people who don't really understand what code is yet. I don't know very many, if any, devs that actively use Lovable, which is fine. It's not really for them. It's kind of crazy they have a GitHub integration, all those other layers, but they aren't really focused on devs. There is an angle of helping beginners get more into dev that is exciting, but that's not the role of these tools, at least not fully. That is kind of what Replit used to be. Replit I used to call the easiest product to graduate from because you use Replit when you're learning how to code, and then a week in, you know enough code to realize how broken the platform is and then move somewhere else. But now they are yet another competitor in this super saturated vibe coding space. I still remember when they raised a bunch of money to go train their own models at Replit. That was hilarious. Good days. So I think the reason that the dip is happening is quite simple. The novelty wore off. The idea that a person who has heard about code before, maybe they have one friend who writes code a little bit and they know that friend makes a lot of money and they think it's cool. Like everyone has an app idea. I went to a concert yesterday and one of my friends in the music scene was really excited to tell me about his app idea and how much he wants to build it. That is what these platforms are selling to. They are selling this idea that anyone can be a developer. I'm going to do a real weird comparison here. Oh, let me redo that. God. I'm going to do a real weird comparison here. Remember GoPro? Suddenly, everyone has an action camera. They can film anything. You can add it to your helmet when you're skiing. You can add it to the front of your bike. You can use your GoPro to film anything. What GoPro brought to the world was a nearly infinite amount of footage that no one will ever watch. If we talk about a camera like the one I'm using here, my Lumix S5 2X, that costs $2,000 and my lens costs another $1,000, my guess is that the average video filmed on one of these cameras is seen by at least a few hundred people. The average video filmed on a GoPro is seen by 0 people because the people who are using the GoPro aren't even looking at the footage themselves. It's the novelty of knowing they have it that's exciting to them, and the potential that they could take the footage from their GoPro and make something of it, and then they never do. GoPro is selling an aspiration, not a product. They are selling the promise to you as a person who's interested in sports that you could film it and share it and edit it and people will love it. And then no one does. No one does. I would guess in a similar sense that the average code that was written pre-AI was probably used a couple hundred times. Some code is used millions of times a second. Some code is used once every couple of weeks. But the majority of code being written is being deployed and is being used for something. The fact that GoPro is... So what does this have to do with GoPro? Where are they at now? They sell these aspirations. They're doing pretty well, right? Like they're a big company. About that. GoPro peaked at about $15 a share, about $14 in 2021. Maybe they peaked higher before that. Oh yeah, they peaked way higher before that. Back in 2015, when it seemed like they were all the rage, they peaked at $85 a share. They hit an all-time low in January of this year. Actually, no, it's February, where they were down to 70 cents per share. That's a 100x drop in valuation. It seemed like GoPro had an incredible business going for them because everybody had one. But then the novelty wore off. They sold a promise, the promise died, and what's left is penny stocks. And I am a little bit scared, again, as an investor in some of these companies, that we might be at a similar spot here. There is a happy potential ending with the GoPro stuff, which is that Insta360 found real ways to make useful products within that sphere of business. But even then, their market cap is lower than where GoPro peaked, and I don't know how much further they can go with it. GoPro's a dead fucking business, though. Like, they are fucked. So that's what I'm thinking here. I think that the majority customer of a product like Lovable or Replit, and even Bolt V0, and I'm not as familiar with Immersion, but hypothetically that too, my assumption is that the average person using one of these products is not a developer. There's only an estimated like 40-ish million developers in the world, if I recall. Sorry. Up to 47 million devs, depending on where you're getting your estimates from. There are not that many programmers. So if there's 47 million devs and Lovable peaked at 35 million users, these people aren't devs, obviously. Duh. These numbers are crazy relative to the size of the dev space because these numbers are not numbers of devs. These are numbers of people who want to be devs or want to get the dev part out of the way so they could hypothetically maybe do something useful. And then they realize that they can't, or they run out of ideas. Everyone has an app idea. The novelty of getting to try building it is really exciting, which is why people would try it, subscribe, and then go and do it. And then they realize that building an app is a lot harder than just writing the code. And the code itself is not something you can just generate. There's a lot of steps to it that require a lot more thought, time, and understanding, especially once you get into debugging. So these apps promising us to just solve the problems either get really expensive when you're doing hundreds of gens just to fix some dumb bug, or you have to go learn how to code yourself too. So if you have the first one, you're spending way too much money, you churn. And if you have the second one, you get good at coding, you move to Cursor and churn. The result here is that a lot of people are leaving, not because the price went up, but because they don't have the ability to do anything without spending more or learning to code. And we've seen this in all of the numbers, in a lot of the posting that people are commenting on. All of that clearly indicates that there's a graduation problem with these tools. If you do use them properly, they become really expensive or you leave. And if you don't use them properly, you're going to churn. That's the reality of businesses like GoPro, like Lovable, even like us with Ping back when we built Ping. Not familiar? We built a tool that's made to be Zoom for streamers, make it easier for content creators to do live collaborations. We put a lot of work into Ping. I'm really proud of what we built with it. We thought we built this tool for professional creators. We really tried to lock in on that. What we ended up with is a subscriber base that's primarily aspiring creators. People who wanted higher quality video because it would make them feel better about the streams that they were doing and make them feel more like the professionals they wanted to be. Aspiring creators and aspiring businesses in general are really bad. Don't sell to the aspiring version of a market. Sell to the market directly. This is a mistake I've seen so many make, and this is why businesses like Cursor, who I should have disclosed earlier, I'm also invested in, are much more likely to survive these changes than companies like Lovable, because you'll graduate from Lovable. Lovable is not meant to be used by us. Lovable is meant to be used by our parents. And once our parents are over the novelty, the same way they're not going to buy a new GoPro because they stopped using their old one 4 years ago, they're not going to keep paying their subscription to Lovable because they don't have anything else to build. They tried building their one app idea. They didn't get very far. They got bored. They got priced out. They got nerd sniped by learning how to actually code. Whatever the reason is, they leave. And my concern here, and my concern for my investment, is that I honestly kind of feel like these AI app builder web apps are just the new version of a GoPro. It's an aspiring business, an aspiring thing, an exciting opportunity for people who don't know how to code to see a bit of what it's like. And for the most part, they're going to vanish. That said, there is a silver lining here. The GoPro wasn't my first camera, but it was the first camera I had that was actually useful. The GoPro gave me a reason to film more, to film my skateboard tricks with my friends, and then to pull it into actual editing software and try to turn it into something. There's a very good chance this YouTube channel would not exist if it wasn't for GoPro. This camera, this weird, small, mostly useless, wide-angle thing we spent too much money on that my dad bought because he wanted to attach it to his helmet when he skied, was the gateway for me to get more into video. And I know I'm not the only person who that's the case for. If it turns out that companies like Lovable raised billions of dollars from people like me in order to pay a bunch of people's, or if it turns out that reword this point. If it turns out that Lovable was worth billions of dollars because people like me invested, and they're now using those billions of dollars to subsidize compute costs and build a platform that allows people like me when I was 12 to play around with these cool code things for the first time, 99 out of 100 of those users are going to just vanish when they're bored, the same way their GoPros rot in a closet. But for that 1 out of 100, it might end up changing their lives. They might end up going down this incredible, chaotic pipeline that is software development in modern times, and they might even be hanging out in my chat right now. That's such an exciting thing. I am hyped for a future where more people can get that first, oh shit, it works moment earlier in their careers, earlier in their learning journeys, because it's a hell of a lot easier to see a result and feel good about it if you're playing around in Lovable or Bolt or Replit than it would be to feel that same win learning how to code from scratch in a random IDE when you don't even know how to pick which editor to code in. Is a huge lowering of the barrier for people who want to try writing code the first time. And even if 99% of them give up because it turns out it's hard, that 1% might get a lot further than they would have otherwise. So the same way I owe the GoPro my career, I think some of you guys are going to owe Lovable yours. And if it turns out they're spending billions of dollars to bring in a small number of people, cool. That's a real win. I like the idea of having more people who learn to code and write code and do awesome things. The same way that Flash enabled a whole new era of games and game developers, the same way Roblox is doing the same thing. I hope that tools like Lovable have a really positive long-term impact on the space, even if they die off in the process. It would also be nice if they don't die, because I would like to make my money back on those investments, but you get the idea. This is how I think about these things. This is how I think about these trends. And this is why I'm not particularly surprised that AI vibe coding web app building tools are not all the rage that they used to be. That's all I got, though. What do you think? Am I overhyping or underhyping? Do you think that there's no potential here at all? I'm curious. Let me know. And until next time, peace, nerds. Cool. That was fun. Ta-da. Nice. 2 more videos. That one was nice and fast. Chill. Nidex with the 39 months of tier 3, 40 total. Jesus Christ. Thank you, man. And we got Oscar here as well at the Prime. Thank you both a ton. Genuinely really appreciate that. I think I'm going to end now because it's Sunday. I want to have a life and I want to be prepared for the almost certain set of drops that are going to happen next week. I suspect there will be a lot of AI companies dropping random things just because there's so much stuff like in the air right now. Yeah, Gemini 3 will likely happen in the next couple weeks. There's too many things occurring for it to not happen. Like, I'd be really surprised if Gemini 3 doesn't happen by end of month. I have literally no idea what's going to be first, though. Or like when it's going to happen. Like, none at all. I just knew last week was too early. Shindigs apparently is live. If so, that's where we're going for sure. Shindings. Nope. Cancel. He is live. Oh, look at that. This is weird. This is like a trippy clone of my streams. Have fun with Shindigs. I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Maybe earlier if news drops and I want to do a stream. Appreciate y'all a ton. Go have fun with Shin. Thank you, Zovi, for the cheer. T3 chat model tier list review. eventually. We need a new tier list. Good seeing you guys. Have fun, nerds. So long. And goodbye to YouTube as well.